Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching America 360 on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories coming out of the United States this hour. US lawmakers are set to advance a bill to release government records on Jeffrey Epstein after Trump's sharp U-turn. With around 100 Republicans ready to break ranks, the Epstein Files Transparency Act now appears certain to pass. US President Donald Trump said he plans to approve Saudi Arabia's request to buy up to 48 US-made F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal ahead of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Washington visit. A civil nuclear cooperation framework will also be signed. President Trump says he will not rule out sending US troops to Venezuela as he signals he is open to direct talks with Nicolas Maduro. Trump says he is willing to hear Maduro's proposals as Washington warns of further military escalation. Over 130 people suspected of being in the US illegally have been detained in North Carolina's Charlotte. This comes as US President Donald Trump ramps up nationwide mass deportation campaigns. A US federal judge says investigative missteps and government misconduct may have tainted the Trump administration's criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey. Comey was charged with making false statements and obstruction of justice in September. A US federal judge says investigative missteps and government misconduct may have tainted the Trump administration's criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey. Comey was charged with making false statements and obstruction of justice in September. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has signalled that the US and India are making progress on the trade agreement. This comes amid the ongoing long-standing trade disputes between the countries over tariff barriers. A Tennessee state court judge has temporarily blocked Republican Governor Bill Lee's deployment of National Guard troops to the city of Memphis. He has ruled that the use of troops was likely not legal under the state's militia law. Now we, of course, start with our top story coming out of the United States, and survivors of crimes perpetrated by Jeffrey Epstein spoke at the US Capitol today ahead of a crucial House vote on a bill demanding the release of Justice Department files on Jeffrey Epstein. The bill would make public key documents including flight logs, travel records and names tied to the investigation. Democratic Representative Ro Khanna expects an overwhelming vote in favour, stressing the bill should go straight to the Senate without amendments. He added that justice is long overdue, and this comes as Trump, who initially opposed the release, reversed his stance and encouraged House Republicans to support the measure. Adding on, former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers announced that he will step back from all public commitments following the Justice Department's investigation into his ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Summers, the former president of Harvard University, said his decision was aimed at rebuilding trust and repairing relationships. The move came after the House Oversight Committee released thousands of documents related to Epstein, including personal correspondence between Summers and the late sex offender. Summers expressed deep shame, acknowledging the pain caused by his continued communication with Epstein, saying that he takes full responsibility for his misguided decision. Epstein survivors are now speaking ahead of the crucial vote release of the Epstein files, appealing to the representatives. Let's cut across.
What is their energy? What do they smell like? What sound do they make when they laugh? Really think about that child, just for a moment. Now I want you to picture a pair of giant looming wooden doors and an overbearing marble landing. Those are the doors to Jeffrey Epstein's house. Do you allow that child to enter or not? If the answer is yes, you would allow entrance. You stand with predators. If the answer is no, then congratulations, you're on the right side of justice. Now you have homework. I am calling for the American people. You have homework. Call your congressional leaders. Call your senators. Please support this bill. Let's get it all released. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're now joined by Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, and he joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, Raymond. It's a pleasure to have you here speaking about this topic. Of course, this is merely the first step of a long process, of course, that this bill is going to go through first the House of Representatives, then the Senate, and then eventually, of course, end up on President Donald Trump's desk. If this does go through, how likely is it that the Epstein Transparency Act will be signed by the president in the Oval Office?
Well, thanks very much, Thomas, for having me. It's always a pleasure. You know, it seems to me that there are two basic principles at stake here that are important to democracy. One is equal treatment under the law. You can't have one rule
interviewed here with this background.
Trump and another rule for
Hello, how are you? Very good. Nice to see you.
I do apologise. There seems to be some audio issues, Raymond.
Transparency
Very well.
Is key to democracy and is extremely important for an informed citizenry.
I'm not filming you. I'm filming myself.
Right.
I do apologise there, Raymond. We seem to have some audio issues. Hopefully that's going to get sorted out very soon. Just bear with us just as we get that sorted. Yes, of course, that we are, of course, covering the ongoing situation of the release of the Epstein files, which is, of course, at its first stage, going into a crucial House vote today, much after Donald Trump, of course, was against the release of this and is now backing House Republicans to sign on for the release in it, to vote in favour in a dramatic U-turn by the US president. Okay, apologies there, Raymond. We seem to have had some audio issues. Raymond, going back to that, of course, this does have to be signed into law by Donald Trump. If you don't mind carrying on what you were previously saying, apologies before we saw those audio issues there.
Well, thanks. I was saying that two important principles here are one, equal treatment under the law. You can't have one rule for President Trump and another rule for Democrats. Second, you've got to have transparency if you're going to have an informed citizenry that's able to participate in democracy. That having been said, the unusual situation in which the president has made a complete U-turn on the release of these documents is an example of what happens when you get crossways with your own supporters. He had pumped up his supporters on a conspiracy theory involving Epstein and Democrats. And it is perfectly apparent that there are enough votes in the House of Representatives to pass this. So now, rather than trying to say that he's in any way, shape, or form against this, he's taken a complete U-turn. It's the old adage of "I'm their leader. Which direction are they going in?" And he's found out that the direction in which his own MAGA supporters are going is not the one which he had staked out.
I do apologise, Raymond, for that. Just going back, of course, when Donald Trump has previously released files, we've seen the release of the JFK files. We've seen the files released in terms of Martin Luther King, but of course they're always heavily redacted. Of course, victims' names that are victims of sexual assault and, of course, the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein will expectedly be redacted in these files. However, how much more of it, if you can tell us, will we see? Will Donald Trump be able to see if his name is in those files released before he signed it, for example?
Well, I think that there is a suspicion that part of the reason for the U-turn is that he has reached an agreement with the Attorney General on redaction of portions which would implicate him. So it's not only trying to get ahead of the majority vote, which will be against his position, but the suspicion is, of course, that the redaction will eliminate key evidence involving the president. We have to wait and see as to what comes out, but you put your finger really on a very important point, is that there must be some reason even beyond the freight train of support for this bill, which has caused President Trump to reverse his stand.
Yes, and Raymond, we all wait in anticipation to see what comes out. Do stay with us as we have further updates, this time from the foreign policy angle. US President Donald Trump has said that he will talk to Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro as US military has built up tensions in the Caribbean. Trump added that he would be okay with US anti-drug strikes inside Mexico. Trump has sharply boosted the US military presence in the Caribbean to combat what he describes as drug trafficking networks operating outside of several Latin American nations, including Venezuela and Mexico. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that Washington is moving to designate a cartel allegedly linked to Maduro as a terrorist organization. Raymond joins us once again. Raymond, of course, we know that Donald Trump is a fan of leader-to-leader diplomacy. What are the chances of him having a conversation with Nicolas Maduro and this de-escalating? Do you think there's any possibility of that happening?
Well, you know, in order to wage peace, which is the ultimate goal, peace with justice, you have to have a strategy and you have to have partners. That has not been the approach of Donald Trump. President Trump prides himself on being the great man to be able to come out on top of any transaction. So it is quite natural that after acting as prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner by destroying boats at sea, that he will then say that he can solve the problem as the great man in a conversation with Maduro. Of course, this approach has not worked in regard to Ukraine. It's not worked in regard to many of the problems which he claims to be able to solve. I think it's always better to have talking rather than killing, but the idea that you're going to be able to resolve these international problems through a face-to-face real estate kind of transaction talk is just not borne out by the facts. And in fact, it seems to me that what it does is lead to further difficulties and the greater likelihood of hostilities.
And Raymond, of course, Donald Trump cites the drug flow into the United States, the fentanyl crisis, of course, which has been plaguing the US for years as the reason for this buildup, this military buildup in the Caribbean, has declared war on narco-terrorists. However, most of the drugs going into the United States, of course, comes from border crossing points and not from Venezuela. What could be the motive here of this military buildup, if it isn't that?
Well, the motive is obvious, and that is to try to exert domination over what President Trump considers as part of his empire. and his empire extends to those who disagree with him in South America, Latin America. He's really a throwback to the late 19th century when the United States tried to send in the Marines in order to solve problems in Central and South America. So the whole drug approach is really a smokescreen for a domination kind of theory, an empire kind of theory. This is not the way in which the world had been trending since World War II, to try to have institutions, to have police powers, to be able to solve matters with some sense of rule of law, and looking to a future of peace and prosperity. This is not President Trump's approach. It's one which runs counter to provisions of international law, particularly the United Nations Charter, but that is the course upon which he is set.
Raymond Vickery, thank you very much for talking to us, and also profuse apologies, of course, for those technical issues faced just then. Okay, we're now moving on. And US President Donald Trump will roll out the red carpet for Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This visit is expected to advance the sale of F-35 fighter jets and a host of business deals. It will be the first trip by bin Salman to the United States since the 2018 killing of Saudi critic Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents in Istanbul, which triggered global outrage. On the Jamal Khashoggi case, the US intelligence had concluded that Mohammed bin Salman had approved the capture or killing of Khashoggi. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince denied ordering the operation. He acknowledged responsibility as the leader of the country. The warm welcome the Crown Prince will receive in Washington is the latest sign that relations have recovered from the deep strain caused by the murder case. As per reports, US-Saudi deals are expected on technology, manufacturing, defense, and more. Now we move on, and a US judge has ruled that there is evidence of misconduct in how a federal prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, secured criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey. US Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick found significant legal errors in presenting evidence and instructing grand jurors, potentially undermining the integrity of the case. The judge ordered that the grand jury materials be turned over to Comey's defense lawyers, calling it an extraordinary remedy necessary due to unique circumstances. Comey faces charges of making false statements and obstructing a congressional investigation. Critics, including Comey, argue that the charges are politically motivated, tied to President Trump's personal animus towards Comey. Fitzpatrick highlighted investigative mistakes such as reviewing evidence without a warrant and exposing attorney-client privilege material. Despite this, the trial judge temporarily halted the order. Joining us now is... Okay, apologies there once again. We now move on, and more than 130 people suspected of being in the US illegally were detained in Charlotte, North Carolina over the weekend as the Trump administration ramped up its nationwide deportation campaign. Customs and Border Protection says arrests were made on Saturday and Sunday, but offered no details on ongoing operations. Local leaders in Charlotte and Raleigh are urging calm, stressing that constitutional rights must be protected. Charlotte Mayor V. Lyles says the city stands with residents feeling anxious. The crackdown has sparked peaceful protests, including a student walkout, and some Latino-owned businesses have closed amid fear and uncertainty. Governor Josh Stein has sharply criticized the raids, calling agents' tactics paramilitary and accusing them of racial profiling. Homeland Security says the operation stemmed from local officials refusing nearly 1,400 federal detainer requests. The timeline for when Charlotte operations will end remains unclear. And that's a wrap on America 360. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.